Alright, YouTube, it's time to remark upon the new right and why it's growing online and why the old guard left is withering on the vine. Hasn't really made inroads into social media in any meaningful sense. You have the usual sort of pink hair Twitter accounts and stuff like that, and you have some, third wave feminist or progressivist YouTubers and some Facebook pages, certainly. But Facebook is a little bit different from YouTube, Twitter, some of these other sites. There's more censorship applied, certainly, than on YouTube, number one. The content can't be as edgy. Even posting links to stuff that you yourself haven't made, have nothing to do with, even that can get you banned on Facebook. But if you refer to something that's, really out there on YouTube and you're just making a video about it, including a link, that's not even a flaggable offense on YouTube. A little bit different metrics there. Google doing better than Zuckerberg, I suppose. But the new right has one clear specific advantage over the sort of 90s into 2000s era left. The left, because it's absorbed so many social justice warriors, has gotten to the point where anything that you find enjoyable is somehow morally wrong. You can't do it. You can't say this. You can't think this. You can't insert something here. The new right hasn't done that. The old right did. The Evangelo right of the 1980s or something like that, they certainly acted in that same manner, and they continued to compete on this moral token well into the Bush administration and even into the early stage of the Obama administration before the new right, taking off from sort of the dying embers of the staggering Tea Party, actually emerged as a collective of ideologies as opposed to one sole ideology, which it had been before. That's the other advantage, is decentralization, but I've already talked about that. On the moral token, why would somebody, a younger millennial or someone from Generation Z, they're looking at all these ideologies. The left wants to tell them video games are all sexist and evil, you shouldn't enjoy this, you shouldn't enjoy that, this book you shouldn't be reading because it's politically incorrect or it's revisionism, you shouldn't listen to this YouTuber because they're a bigot or a Nazi or something like that, you shouldn't subscribe to this Twitter feed, you shouldn't listen to this politician, you shouldn't do this, that, and the other thing. And by the way, we've got these sacred cow politicians and corporate media firms, and you dare criticize them. And that's not what's happening in the new right. In the new right, because you've got a looser collective of actual ideologies. You've got the alt-right and sort of the fringe, the alt-light that, rides around the alt-right. And then you've got paleocons and constitutionalists and libertarians and ANCAPs and all these different groups that have sort of semi-amalgamated. And because there's no specific leadership structure or anything like that, there's no central representative. You got populism, nativism, all these other things, different types of nationalists. Because of that, there's no single orderly, empowered group to tell people, yes, this is or isn't our ideology. But the old left is different. And we look at what happened with the DNC or some of the leftist outlets in the last election. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders spar. They're competing to be the candidate that goes up against big bad orange Hitler Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders gets fucked over. He gets shafted. Donna Brazile has now confirmed to the world, I helped Hillary Clinton cheat. She was not a legitimate candidate at all because she might not have won if the DNC, which is supposed to be more or less unbiased, didn't pull out all stops to make sure she was nominated because they were afraid Bernie Sanders couldn't win because too far left, which might honestly be true. Or he's too old, or he's not Clinton, he can't pull in the billionaire donors as easily, he's too grassroots for our sensibilities. Bernie Sanders, of course, loses. He bends knee and says, oh yeah, I endorse Hillary, blah blah, and then disappears off in the woods to buy his third home, like a true sellout. What ends up happening is that for months thereafter, a lot of these groups continued to try to browbeat people who stood on ideology. The reason that they opposed Hillary Clinton wasn't, Democrat, therefore wrong, but ideology. More like, I'm a Democrat, but I can't support Hillary because I think she's everything wrong with the Democratic Party. WikiLeaks comes along, shows clearly with 100% certainty, yeah, she's totally fucking corrupt. And yet they still beat the drum of war, and they don't even beat it against, like, the Trumpites. They say, oh yeah, he's Hitler and his fans are dumb, but then we've also got these burnouts over here. These horrible retards are going to let the Republicans win by refusing to support Hillary Clinton. And what you've got is a left that attempts to, insofar as it can, it tries to fool or force people into supporting whatever the Democratic Party happens to propose, whatever globalism happens to propose is a good idea, even if it's against the self-interest of its own members. It's also very, very friendly towards the idea of censorship. It's very, very friendly towards the idea of overt and centralized control, which is something the new right doesn't do. The big fear for people on the right is that further amalgamation will lead to more centralization, and it'll start being moralist now because the Republicans control, like, the House and the Senate and the presidency, and they'll become moralists as well. And this is looking back at history. If you want to capture a further generation and stabilize your movement and keep growing, you can't go down the path of moralism. You can't just sit there saying mud degeneracy over and over and over and say, oh, we're bringing back all the social wedge issues and we're going to double down on the drug war, beat on gay marriage, and take abortion away. And it won't work because people generally don't like being told what to do. Now, who among all other groups of people really doesn't like being told what to do? The young. They don't want to be told that the video game they like playing is sexist, so they should feel bad for playing it. They don't want to be made to feel like this book is unacceptable, it's off limits, it's taboo, and if you tell them that it is, they're going to go and read it and they're going to like it even more. It's not going to work. Censorship and suppression never works among sort of youth movements. Right now, that youth is increasingly new right because the left has gone full moralist mode. You can't say this because sexism. You can't think that because homophobia. You can't do this because racist. You are a racist, sexist, homophobe, evil, cislord, bigot, and so forth. They throw all these weird terms around to describe everybody. What they've done is they've made themselves a bunch of boring bullies. A bunch of outdated crones and whiners, essentially. And you have like old hippies joining the chorus of some of these others, like middle-aged, like maybe Gen X leftists, who are all supporting the same thing. They're all saying the same thing. Oh, this book's wrong, that movie's evil. People that didn't like the new Ghostbusters, despite the fact that it was a pile of steaming crap, they're all a bunch of evil cislord bigots or something like that. They actually attempt to make people feel bad for having rather innocuous opinions. That's what the old right used to do. That's what the evangelocons of the old right did. That's why they collapsed their own movement. The left has now begun to do the same thing. It's picking up steam over the next few years. They're not going to gain support under the current plans that they're using. It's going to backfire badly. And hopefully for them, the best that they can hope for is that they get absolutely crushed in the midterm elections. They finally have a sort of spiritual awakening, reformat what they're doing and try to get with the times, and stop perpetually trying to make people feel like shit for any opinions or views they may have or anything they may say or do, if they happen to be white, or they happen to be male at all, or they happen to be just, they're straight and they're not afraid to say that they're straight or something. Or they're just not social justice warriors. You've got people that would be considered like, alt-liberals or something like that, or rather paleo-liberals. They don't fit in with the modern leftist movements because their ideology is basically the inverse. They're sitting there talking about, common sense taxation. No, I don't really want a war on the rich. We've got enough gun control, not really concerned about that. We're already giving people welfare. It's not even really working. Maybe we should think about what we're doing and restructure it. Yeah, we've got too much debt. They almost sound a little bit like new right conservatives now, don't they? Yeah, there's your old left right there. They've been so left behind, so disenfranchised by like the 80s and 90s liberal mentality of Mondale through Clinton and into the Obama era and with all the Clintonians. That adopt all these side wedge issues in order to get elected. They're actually like beating down their own movement. It's funny to watch them do this. You couldn't think of a worse strategy. It's never worked before. Unless you intend to undergo some sort of violent socialistic revolutionary purge, this sort of thing doesn't work well. The wedge issue stuff, you'd limit it to like Pol Pot saying, oh, well, this Islamic and Buddhist minority within Cambodia must be purged. Well, no one stood in the way because he had the guns, or the pickaxes, as the case may be. Wasn't afraid to use them, of course, and was beating up on these smaller groups before he turned on the majority of the population, of course, in the urban cores of that country. Unless you intend to do that, it's not going to help you within a representative system of government to constantly ruminate on wedge issues. The evangelicons tried it. Oh, we're a Christian nation now. If you're Christian, you got to vote for us. It didn't work. Their opponents still ended up carrying the day. At the end of that, in the twilight of that evangelocon era, they had weakened their own power structure by continuously disenfranchising minority segments of the population that eventually added up to a majority. The left decided to go even a step further. They just alienate the majority on several counts. Anybody in this country who is male, anybody who in this country is white, anybody who is straight, anybody who is particularly religious, those people all end up more or less getting together in one group that's constantly opposed to leftist ideology because they're all being targeted by it. They didn't think this through quite so easily. And then you get the censorship and moralism. And the left of today, the college kids with the pink hair, and the glasses that don't have lenses in them, that sort of person. You know, the fat positive movement, the third wave feminists or whatever. Those groups of people are looking more and more like evangelicals around the mid-1980s, complete with the same weird moral witch hunts. So they're destroying their own movement. And they're being led to this destruction by people who claim to be part of those movements, who are really just opportunists that are out to get money and attention. And so you shouldn't worry too much about them right now. What the new right needs to do, though, is not get bogged down in the moral issues, which invariably lose popularity. They may be popular at first. They may be popular among the new right now to say, oh, like mud degeneracy about some topic or another. That popularity peaks very early and tends to decline significantly. If you make that a perpetual platform of any campaign or ideology within the new right, it won't serve you well long term. Temporarily, it'll be fine. You'll make gains. You very quickly end up losing them, and long term, you end up disgracing an entire movement for generations. And then whatever comes after Generation Z would be far left. It'd be like millennials on steroids. To avoid that from happening, all you have to do is not delve into the moral issues and the censorship and all this crap that the left is currently doing, and look at the general reigning ideals. The general idea is we're tired of these lefties telling us what we can and cannot say, do, and believe in. We're tired of it. And that's why you have that rise of these new mentalities. So then the answer wouldn't be to turn around and do the same thing, only from the other side of the political spectrum, because then you're going to get similarly targeted. And it will lead to the same general end result. It may be faster or slower, it may be bigger or smaller in its overall impact, but it still screws you over to some degree. It weakens you, it eventually shoves you under, and somebody else ends up taking over. The one major advantage is that the new right's not really conglomerated together. It's more of a loose confederation of ideologies than it is one single ideology that happens to be attempting to suppress all others within its core. But there is the risk of that happening. You see it even right now with people from these various groups infighting against one another, which shouldn't be going on. They've all got the same enemy. They all at least share some ideological similarities. It's like when the alt-right or alt-light begin fighting with one another. Why bother? Shouldn't you be complaining about the left right now and what they've done that led to the rise of both of your, movements / non-movements at the same time? That's what should be fixated on. There's your winning issue right there. If you want to continue holding political sway, if you want to continue impacting society, that's what you have to do. So the new right shouldn't really delve into that. And the new right is growing online, primarily, in an extra political fashion. It's almost outside of the realm of politics and the media at large. They all, even the right-wing outlets there, think the new right has something to do with, beating off on frogs or something like that. All the Ben Shapiros and Glenn Becks of the world, they hate the new right. They're part of the neoconservative establishment. They fucking hate the new right in every possible way. I know, Glenn Beck says, oh, I'm a libertarian. No, he's not. He's just a fucking evangelo-con. He's an old guard, so-called conservative. He's right on board with the Zionism and the sex baiting and race baiting that goes on the left. He agrees with that sort of crap for the most part. And he's part of this weird sort of fringe religious ideology. I don't even know if he qualifies as a mainstream Mormon anymore. And then Ben Shapiro, of course, he shares some similarities and continuously attacks the same online culture that actually led to the dominance of the kind of political philosophy that he claims to be part of. It's the same thing. That's not the way to keep a movement fueled and growing, or even to stabilize it. That's the way to destroy your own movement. All these, sort of outsiders, these Johnny-come-latelys, who had to wait until after the election to say, oh yeah, I'm on board with the Trump train and stuff like that, when others were saying it months and months before it happened. When they had already lost hope and were looking at 4 years of Hillary Clinton, other people had already taken up that banner and were fighting the ideological war. These people sat back, or in many cases sat in the way, and now they want to pretend that they're standard bearers of conservatism, or standard bearers of libertarianism, or the standard bearers of new wave populism. Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, and all these other people. And that's not the way that it operates. Rand Paul, who right now is trying to literally sink so-called Trump's own healthcare plan, which is really the Ryan plan, now he's getting a bunch of heat from these same groups. Why aren't they aiming that fire at someone who actually deserves it, rather than someone who very early on endorsed Donald Trump, didn't really have a problem with him, and just primarily has a problem with this and domestic surveillance, and at least is sane enough to try to do his job, and sane enough to attack people that, they spend all their day whining about how great leftism is. Those same moral lefties that are slowly dying off. Why do you think that all these cable networks, with their dishonest, crappy-ass news, have decided to move to YouTube and bundle themselves together despite being competitors for $35 a month? Why do you think they're doing that? The old guard sort of media that's in bed with the old guard right and the old left, as well as the social justice warriors, they can't even compete with the internet anymore. They can't even compete. They're losing so much money, so much viewership, and so much trust. It's pointless. They have to move online now. Which means YouTube is probably screwing around with some of its notifications and algorithms to knock politically minded independent YouTubers out of the way. I think that's probable at this point. It won't work. They're going to try. It's probably some contractual obligation. They're not going to talk about it. Oh well, they thought that those friggin' channels were going to get them more views than PewDiePie, or probably fewer people will actually subscribe to the service than subscribe to many YouTubers. So good luck with that one. I think it'll be a failed venture. I think that they're going to, very quickly, that list of cable firms operating on YouTube is likely to change. Considering the ones that they chose early on, it's going to be a little bit of a shit show. Fox News, yeah, well, yeah. That's what I want to do. I want to turn my YouTube channel into a television and watch non-interactive content like I could already do on TV, and pay just a little bit more to get several hundred more channels than I'm getting here. And just, I'm just going to ignore all the YouTubers I can communicate with. I'm just going to ignore all that. Now, that's a vestige of the same corporate mentality that the old left has. That's why they're losing. They can't compete online. They can't compete outside of an echo chamber. When they actually have to debate, when they actually have to see that people sometimes disagree with them, oh no. They can't deal with that. They're so self-righteous. It'd be like if the internet, if social media had arisen back in the 1980s, do you think that the extreme moral evangelocons would have liked the fact that people could make content dissenting from their ideas, say, no, I don't think we're a Christian nation, or no, I don't believe in Jesus, or no, I don't believe witches are trying to abduct your children, or something like that. By the way, Pat Robertson's an idiot, and Billy Graham's an idiot. Oh, they would have gone mad. And they also would have tried to censor that content, the same as the social justice warriors have continued to try to do over the last few years to those of us who don't agree with them. Of course they're trying to censor that content. But times will change. Eventually the shoe will be on the other foot. It's just a matter of how long it takes. Hopefully the new right can get some good shit accomplished. And why don't we just cast the ring into the fire, so to speak, and begin moving towards codifying lack of censorship and free market style competition online? Why isn't that what we're doing? I would think that that would be a good thing to do, because then it doesn't matter which way the pendulum moves, everyone can still speak freely. And ultimately it boils down to, if you think your ideology is correct or is superior to others, it should outcompete these other ideologies over time. So then you don't need censorship, you have nothing to worry about. And both the left and the right believe this, and yet they're both, when they're in positions of power, they tend to push for censorship. It's exactly the wrong strategy. You should be pushing to utterly codify a lack of censorship in every meaningful way and sense, because then you can continue to compete forever. And the internet will always be what it is now, a place for free discussion. That would be so wonderful to know that it was going to remain stable long term and wouldn't fall to, corporate mentality. Would be wonderful. That should please everybody, left, right, and center. That's about all.